Hello, everyone, and welcome to MEMO in Conversation. This year, we've been celebrating 10 years since the launch of the Palestine Book Awards, and today I have a special guest with me to discuss the Palestine Book Awards and more, Lynn Gaspard. Lynn was shortlisted for the Independent Publishers Guild Young Publisher of the Year Award in 2013. She is the editor of Don't Panic, I'm Islamic and a trustee of the Shubbak Festival. She is also the publisher of Saqi Books, a leading and award-winning independent publisher of more than 3 decades and London's oldest bookstore specializing in Arab and Middle Eastern literature. Welcome, Lynn. It's a pleasure to have you speaking with us today.
I'm very happy to be here with you.
Now, Lynn, during the recent Israeli bombardment of Gaza, Saqi has made it available to download free of charge several ebooks on Palestine from their website. Why did you choose to do that? And as a publisher, how important a role do you think literature plays when it comes to a place like Palestine, which is under the ongoing Israeli military occupation?
Thank you. That's right. Over a long weekend, we made available 20 of our Palestine ebooks. We made them available for free to download internationally and unlimited in response to the escalating and devastating attacks on Palestine. It was a quick and gut reaction. I think that it's always very difficult and very painful to witness any kind of injustice occurring around the world. And we're in an enviable position as publishers because we have access to hundreds of insightful, informative, and quite often really beautiful works. And of course, so it was a no-brainer for us to do this. It was our small contribution, a small show of solidarity, of support for Palestine. And literature has a hugely important role to play, in any conflict, because it connects you intimately to the realities and the life of another. And in that sense, it can change minds and it can change lives. It's hugely important.
Absolutely. Now, several books, as I've mentioned, were published by Saqi Books that have either been shortlisted or won MEMO's Palestine Book Awards over the past 10 years. And now, can you maybe share those with our viewers and perhaps tell us if you have any other books published on Palestine this year?
Certainly. So I think 3 of our books were 2 of them won, which was great, and 1 was shortlisted, if I remember correctly. So the most recent was the beautiful monograph of works by Nabil Anani, whose book was shortlisted for the prize, and he went on to win the Lifetime Achievement Award. And he's a hugely important figure in the development of contemporary art in Palestine. Really poignant, superb artworks. The other book that won was The Commander by Layla Parsons, and that's a very important political biography of Al-Kawuji, I've forgotten his first name, who was a very important... who was a very important military leader in the first half of the 20th century, who ended up taking part in most of the liberation battles against French or British, or even prior to that, Ottoman colonialism in the region. So really brilliant book. Very proud to publish that also, and that won that year, so that was fantastic. And the last one was Meet Me in Gaza, which is very close to my heart, by Louisa Waugh. And that's a sort of travel memoir book of her time in Gaza, but really revealing the daily lives of Gazans. It's such a heartfelt, tender portrait of life in Gaza. So really beautiful book. This year, has been a bit topsy-turvy because of all the lockdowns that we've endured. We've not published a book about Palestine this year, but recently we've published, in the last 2 years, we've published, I think, 4 other Palestine-related books. A Map of Absence, which is brilliant, and I really highly recommend it. It is an anthology of Palestinian writing on the Nakba. Imagine, over 100 years. So, really important anthology. What else did we do? We published a great history called Legacy of Empire. This is by a British historian of imperialism, who's basically writing about the British involvement so it's looking at specifically the first half of the 20th century and the legacy of empire, of Britain's, imperialism in the region. Really, really insightful, very informative, and very accessible for those who may not know, who may need a bit more insights into that. Anyway, and a few more, but I'll leave it there.
And if I were to ask you personally, if you would recommend a single book, a specific book on Palestine for people to read these days, I know there are probably loads to choose from, but what would you recommend?
This is very, very difficult. This is a very difficult question because usually when someone asks this, I'll say for poetry, read this, for fiction, read this, for history. So to choose one,
you could go ahead and choose I
will try. I will choose 2, if that's okay. And I think I will choose 2 memoirs. I just feel that it's so important to highlight the human experience and bring that to humanize the conflict or the occupation, to bring that to the fore, to bring to the fore the emotional and personal experiences, because I think that if we can connect at a human level, it is so much, from there stems everything, and that obviously encourages solidarity because we're all the same, and I think it's very easy behind news headlines and politicians and things to forget that. So I think I would choose In Search of Fatima, probably, by Ghada Karmi, which relates Ghada's family's expulsion from Palestine, so the Nakba. And then I would also, because I asked for 2, I would choose I Saw Ramallah by the late poet Mourid Barghouti. So we're sort of bookending, and this is on his return to his homeland after Oslo. And they're both beautifully lyrical and poignant memoirs. I think they would be wonderful introductions to Palestine and the occupation.
Yeah, I think I would also maybe add, now with everything that's happening in Jerusalem, Ilam Pape's perhaps The Rise and Fall of a Palestinian Dynasty, where he traces actually the Husseini family in Jerusalem. I think that would make for a very good read. Now back to Saqi Books. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't want to mention any Saqi titles. I was trying to be fair. No, but thank you. Anyway, those are the 2
more
memoirs.
Inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the words of the Times, and let me read this here, talking about Saqi, anyone interested in Arab culture is aware of the invaluable role Saqi plays in making available pioneering, specialist, and often controversial books that large publishers refuse to go near. Now, Saqi, as I've mentioned earlier, it's London's oldest bookstore and publisher specialized in Arab and Middle Eastern literature. I remember even growing up seeing lots of Saqi Books titles, even in Gaza.
You're from Gaza?
I'm from Gaza, yes. But can you maybe, tell our viewers or give our viewers a brief background of how Saqi Books came to be, a little bit about, the story of Saqi?
My best to be brief. If I'm not, tell me. Yeah, of course. My parents and their best friend moved to London. They escaped the war in Lebanon, the civil war in the 70s. And there were no Arabic bookshops here at the time. And they decided to open one. They thought, why not? Um, so they set that up. I think the bookshop first opened in 78 or 79. And initially, we only had the Arabic language section. And then a few years later, we opened an English language section. But a lot of the books just weren't available in English. And that prompted them to create and launch a publishing house in 1983. And initially, we published, one of our best-selling books we published, I think, in 84 or 86, which I think is amazing. Quite a few of those were first published in the 80s. And
Yeah.
I guess the Crusades Through Arab Eyes, but I mean, Ma'loof, for example, we first published then. And that was a really exciting time. They were sort of learning the ropes, of the industry, and making available books in English language that hadn't been available before, translating from Arabic or often from French, from other languages. We, of course, are specialized in the Middle East, North Africa, and the wider Muslim world, mainly in humanities, I would say, because that's probably our principal interest. A lot of literature, history, politics, and so on, but a lot of arts, monographs and such. And essentially, we were unashamedly supporting minority voices from within the region. So it's a minority within a minority, because we're based in the West anyway. So I think we played at the time a really essential contribution, to the within the wider Middle Eastern community, but also within the publishing milieu and the cultural milieu at the time. After that, towards the end of the war in Lebanon, we opened a branch in Beirut, so published from Arabic from there. And that's really how it was set up and how we've developed. As you say, it's now been 4 decades, which is incredible. And we've survived, recessions, pandemics, wars, death threats. We've survived it all, and we're still going strong. And, I think that, as I said, especially with the English language, we fill quite an important gap, in my opinion, because often these are either voices, as I said, I mentioned those memoirs, it's so important to hear direct from those people, or from experts on the region, but often there's a sort of knowledge of the region or a certain sensitivity that is lacking. So I think that's, our direct links to the region certainly works in our favor.
Well, considering you've published, a wide range of books relating to the Middle East, including, translations of new and classic Arabic literature, and in fact won several diversity awards, how do you get to feel or see the impact of your work on Western audiences? And let's say, what are Saqi's bestsellers or maybe fan favorites?
Sometimes we do, and those are wonderful moments, because often, especially the last 12 months, we've not held as many events and so on. So when we do interact with our readers and with those wider communities, it's such a treat, really. It's a gift for us. We do feel this very often in the responses that we receive from readers online, usually so before the pandemic at events, or even with our online events when people leave comments, during the events. That's wonderful. And generally speaking, it's hugely supportive and very positive. We had a flurry of really warm and very positive, supportive emails after the Palestine ebook promotion that we ran, for example. We also see, support in other ways, so in more traditional ways, from course adoptions at universities of our books, you know, demand for our authors or our books at festivals and events, you know, internationally, actually, not just UK wide. And also, you know, all the coverage of our books in mainstream media and such. So, yeah, fan favorites. I mean, I can tell you what our bestsellers are, that's for sure. So The Crusades to Our Eyes is one by Amin Malouf. It's a great book. Victims of a Map, the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish, Adonis, and Samih Al-Qasim. That's a top seller. Black Britain by Paul Gilroy. It's a photographic history of Black people in the UK. That's a consistent top seller. And that's a really stunning book. What else do we do which sells well? Oh, recently, The Things I Would Tell You. It's an anthology by British Muslim women. That does very well. That did very well. And that was a book of the year, actually, in The Guardian, I think. Yes, it was. Yeah, which was lovely. I could list quite a few, but I don't know. Yes.
Well, is there anything else maybe you'd like to share with our viewers, you know, as we're celebrating 10 years since the Palestine Book Awards and Palestinian literature, but also, you know, Middle Eastern literature on the whole, just before we sort of wrap up?
Well, I'd just like to congratulate you on your 10-year anniversary, because it's such an important meeting space, you know, the award ceremonies for people to come together and to celebrate Palestine. And I think that generally, and it does have an important impact, I think that generally, especially with everything else going on in the world, some communities and in some conflict areas can be forgotten. There can be some fatigue to do with certain conflicts, or in this case, occupations. So what you do is so, so important. And even the act of reading, which is why we made those ebooks available, can in itself be an act of solidarity, you know, especially if that's then shared and, you know, this word of mouth thing. So, you know, I think everything that we do, sometimes we can feel disconnected, especially in this pandemic when we've all been separate for so long, but it does bring us together. Going back to your first question, you know, literature makes our world more connected. And these awards are an essential part of the whole sort of ecosystem of publishing and literature. So thank you in return.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn, for joining us and for giving us the time as well. And thank you to our viewers. And we will see you hopefully with another conversation next week. Thank you.
Thank you.